On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Brian Chee, Mr. Curtis Franklin back on the show. Now, zero-day exploits bring a whole new meaning to cybersecurity. The question is your organization ready to defend against one? We'll talk about some of the things you can do. Plus, today we have Josh Kuo. He's DNS nerd from InfoBlox on the show. We're going to get geeky about DNS. And we're going to talk about some of the risks and some of the new standards out there that just might pave the way to better security. You shouldn't miss it. TWIET on the set.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust. This is TWIT.
This is TWIET, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 505, recorded August 5th, 2022. QUIC WIN with UDP 853. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by New Relic. Use the data platform made for the curious. Right now, you get access to the whole New Relic platform and 100 gigabytes of data per month free forever. No credit card required. Sign up at newrelic.com/enterprise. And by Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics big, small, and strange. Listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And by userway.org. Userway is the world's #1 accessibility solution, and it's committed to enabling the fundamental human right of digital accessibility for everyone. When you're ready to make your site compliant, deciding which solution to use is an easy choice to make. Go to userway.org/twit for 30% off Userway's AI-powered accessibility solution. Welcome to TWIET, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world's connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big world of the enterprise. But I can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, starting with the very own Mr. Brian Chee, net architect at Sky Fiber and all-around tech geek. Cheebert, it's great to see you again, my friend. How are you been? What's been keeping you busy?
Actually, I've been wrangling, tech resources because we're getting ready for the 10th annual Orlando Maker Faire. So I'm actually going to be using some interesting gear. It's actually gig over coax. It's using the Mocha standard. So it allows me to run over good quality coax because there's lots of different varieties of coax. 600 meters at gig speeds, which is kind of cool.
That's cool.
And if you're not pushing the distance limit, you can use Mocha compliant. So they have to be a certain type of splitter. You can actually split it and have multiple drops. So that's going to be kind of cool. There is a new thingy out there. It's called a Magic SFP. That allows you to do the same thing in an SFP format. And that definitely plays in the multi-drop world. So that might be a way for me to do all kinds of interesting things like set up robot ruckus. Ooh,
nice.
So it's going to be fun.
Interesting you said that because I think the gig over coax actually helped me quite a bit. Put another access point in the other part of my house. Since there's so many coax going around, I don't use them anymore because I've cut the cable. So it's been actually really helpful, really stable too. I'm surprised.
Yeah, and the funny part is that's one of the ways I got into the industry. I was actually on the old ArcNet standards committee, and one of the big selling points was to use old 3270 coax for this brand new thing called a local area network.
Just one of those things. It's one of those things. Well, it's great to see you, Cheever. Thanks for being back. We also have to welcome back our senior analyst at MDA and all-around enterprise and security expert. He is Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, you've been busy. You've been doing a lot of research, a lot of traveling. How have you been? What's been keeping you busy this week?
Well, I did get more sleep last night than I did before our call last Friday, since I wasn't flying around the East Coast at 2 a.m. But I am getting ready to head out next week. I'm going to be at Black Hat and DEF CON. And just to let folks know, if you're going to be at Black Hat, I believe there are still a handful of tickets available for the Omdia Analyst Summit, where I'm going to be speaking on Tuesday. If you are coming to Black Hat, there's no additional cost for the Omdia Analyst Summit. Head over to darkreading.com/Omdia and you can find how to register. But I'm going to be doing that and then DEF CON. Both of those are going to be great events. Looking forward to it. Finishing up some research, got a lot of writing to do, and starting new research. So all kinds of stuff going on in the world of Omdia, and just looking forward to taking a breath or two after Black Hat. It's been a wild summer.
I bet it is. Well, speaking of lots of things going on, there's lots of things going on in the enterprise, so we definitely should get started now. Zero-day exploits bring a whole new meaning to cybersecurity, and the question is your organization ready for defending against one on your network? Well, we'll talk about some of the things that you can do there. Plus, we have a great guest today. He's DNS. Of course, DNS Security continues to be a great defense against lots of different types of attacks out there. But today we have Josh Crow. He's DNS nerd for InfoBlox on the show today. It's a great title. And we're going to geek out on DNS security and talk a lot about some of the threats that are out there, as well as some of the defenses. So lots more to talk about there. So stick around. But before we do have to jump into this week's news blips. Now, robot vacuums have been proliferating themselves to many homes around the world. It's one of those inconspicuous things that can assist in the mundane tasks that busy working individuals don't like to do. Now, iRobot has been on the forefront of that market with its Roomba brand since 2002. Now, 20 years in the market makes you an expert at something, right? Well, Amazon sees that potential with their $1,000 Astra robot that they launched preview last year. But Amazon has been finding a way to blend its AI platforms and services with more physical devices that have greater reach into people's dwellings and homes. Now, it was a good attempt, but it wasn't as compelling as a device that performed really a dull or monotonous task like vacuuming. Well, what else can Amazon do to get their foot in the door, but hit the ground running at the same time? Well, acquire iRobot, of course. In the deal valued at approximately $1.7 billion, Amazon will acquire iRobot for $61 per share in an all-cash transaction. Nice to have some cash to spend on the side for some robot vacuums. Or do they have bigger plans for iRobot? That's the question. Well, the new iRobot OS is one of those things that Amazon has that can now create a way for them to really create a cohesive experience between their cloud services and serve great purposes, even more so than vacuuming, including watchful eyes on your property even. Well, give it a couple of years for the acquisition and some of the acclimation into their organization. Amazon just might surprise you with the next generation home smart assistant. One hopes it will also do my laundry. Rosie.
Well, things move quickly in the world of cybersecurity. Just 1 month after NIST revealed the first quantum-safe algorithms, Amazon Web Services and IBM have moved forward with implementation plans, Google only slightly behind. These three had something of a head start since IBM researchers contributed to 3 of the 4 algorithms, while AWS had a hand in 2, and Google contributed to 1 of the submitted algorithms. This was a process that started back in 2016 with 69 original candidate algorithms, and it ended up with these 4 that are becoming NIST standards. NIST noted that these are not the last 4, just the first 4. They include Crystal's Kyber, a public-private key encapsulation mechanism for general asymmetric encryption. For digital signatures, NIST selected Crystal's Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx Plus. At the AWS Reinforce conference I attended last week, AWS talked about how they're building an open-source hybrid post-quantum key exchange based on the hybrid post-quantum S2N-TLS with Crystal's Kyber, which connects to the AWS Key Management Service and AWS Certificate Manager. IBM moved forward by specifying the new algorithms into its recently launched Z16 mainframe, a system IBM introduced in April, calling it the, quote, first quantum-safe system. Google, on its part, released a statement saying that they are a decade into an effort to be ready for PQC, that's post-quantum computing, to be ready before quantum computers become widely available. Now, it's important to note that these algorithms are just the first steps in a journey that's going to be long and see many, many different algorithms and systems come to market with the sole aim of defeating those bad guys sufficiently rich or well-connected to get their hands on a quantum computer.
Well, this dark reading story is one of those shame on you stories. So, a T-Mobile store owner apparently managed to make 25 million buckaroonies using stolen employee credentials, is what the headline reads. Well, anyway, law enforcement said, and forgive me on the pronunciation, Ardishti Kuraverdian owned a phone retailer and over the course of several years used stolen employee credentials of more than 50 different T-Mobile employees to unlock hundreds of thousands of phones on the networks of AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile. Removing the unlock allowed the phones to be sold on the black market and enabled T-Mobile customers to stop using T-Mobile services and thereby depriving T-Mobile of revenue generated from customer service contracts and equipment installment plans. Tongue-in-cheek, I kind of find this hard to believe considering how hard it was for me just to unlock my 4-year-old iPhone 6S off the T-Mobile network. So how do you do so many? It's like, how do you do that? Huh?
The browser extensions can be helpful for the most part. They augment capabilities to support broader scenarios for some of the security information or even smart assistance, but sometimes they can be used for nefarious purposes if not careful. Now, almost monthly, I get a message about removing an extension or add-on in Chrome or Safari because they've published or has been published compromised or maybe even a bad malicious add-on that has some suspicious activity out there. Well, researchers have a good one for us this week. According to them, or the security research firm Velocity, there is a new malware disguising itself as a browser extension that siphons data from one of your most precious data sources, dubbed Sharpest. A never seen before malware that hackers from North Korea have been using to serially read and download email and attachments from affected users' Gmail and AOL accounts. Now, since the users already are authenticated when reading email, the extension only has to invoke the data reading functions of the mail client itself, installed using spear phishing or social engineering techniques, and work quietly in the background. The research firm found out that this was the work of a hacking group the company tracks as Sharp Tongue. Now, North Korea's government sponsors this group. The extension also has defense mechanisms to prevent the browser from actually alerting its victims. See, these types of people, I think, really ruin it for the rest of us developers. That means that the browser is not going to protect against these APIs in the future to make it hard to utilize them. But I guess this goes to show you the more powerful the platform, the more power you give to bad actors as well. Now, one word of caution here. Try using really just the vanilla browser regularly out there rather than trying to use extensions to augment it. And now, if you must use extensions, check them regularly, that they're not the ones that are, causing reactive type involvement in maybe siphoning data or maybe sending data out of your network. Now, even the ones you do trust, you should really ensure that they come from reputable sources and don't use your data for bad purposes. Sounds easy, right? Well, browsers are sandboxes, and if you load your precious data in the sandbox and with others there to play as well, it's really just a public park. Don't let your data become an amusement park for the actors around the world. Well, folks, that does it for the blips, but we have the bites coming up. And before we get to the bites, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's New Relic. Now, I know a lot of developers out there, and you're some of the most curious people in the world. The first to explore newest tech, dig into the documentation, not only wanting to know how things work, but why. That's exactly why so many engineers turn to New Relic. Now, New Relic gives you the data about what you build and shows you really what happens in the software development lifecycle. It's a single place to the data from your entire stack, so you don't have to investigate 16 different tools and make those connections manually. Plus, New Relic pinpoints issues down to the line of code, so you know why the problems are happening and you can resolve them quickly. That's why dev and ops teams at DoorDash, GitHub, Epic Games, and more than 14,000 other companies use New Relic to debug and improve their software. And when teams come together around data, it allows you to triage problems, be confident in decisions, and reduce the time needed to implement resolutions using data, not opinions. Use the data platform made for the curious. Right now, you can get access to the whole New Relic platform and 100 gigabytes of data per month, free, forever, no credit card required. Sign up at newrelic.com/enterprise. That's NEWRELIC.com/enterprise. newrelic.com/enterprise. And we thank New Relic for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's time for the bites. Now, what do you do when you become a victim of a zero-day threat? Well, most organizations don't have emergency plans in place to really counteract these types of common threats in today's world. Now, remote code execution bugs are becoming more prevalent in the online landscape. Now, once planted, they can open more deeper, complex exploits that really burrow themselves down within your network and your services. Now, this article from Dark Reading gives a really nice set of examples, including the most recent remote code exploit in zero-day that's out there. It was actually an Atlassian Confluence remote code execution bug. It actually targeted the object graph navigation language injection vulnerabilities that were out there. But when it came time to the attack, it was a massive tidal wave of activity. And what happened next was a really deep set of orchestrations by several groups within their organization and actually several layers within the network to really thwart the attack and minimize the impact that was there. Now, the question is, how do they do it? How do they do it? Well, let's talk about really what some of the things that CISOs can do to help their organizations really be ready for D-Day when it comes to zero-day exploits. What's in the playbook is a really good set of questions. Now, let's talk about your network layer first. Now, your network layer can really give you a lot of information about mitigating attacks. Some believe that your web application firewall is really useless against 0 days, but really contrary to the belief, they can actually give you a really great tool to combat against them. They can create really virtual network rules to stop these attacks in their tracks, and stopping them in their tracks gives you really more room to investigate. Really how deep the rabbit hole goes. Now, there's also other options here. They give another example of client replication databases. It's another way to help prevent attacks from the same compromised IPs that have been performing the same nefarious acts in the past, again, slowing things down. Now, governance and controlling traffic rates. That's another really good one. Increased rate of activity from really specific IPs should be an alert or maybe an automatic rule in your network for maybe throttling and maybe shutting down ports of suspicion. Even so, at least you're tipped off to something that's bad is happening, right? That leads to the next one, which is watching out for bots. There are really a lot of new tools out there that actually can detect activity that doesn't really match the daily usage patterns of your users and are really more mechanical-like or bot-like. Take advantage. I really think you should take advantage of those because those are some really useful tools that are out there. Something easy to overlook as well as in the defense against the dark arts of 0 days is outbound traffic. A common scenario for attackers is attempting to remote code execution penetration testing. And that's sending a command from the network to like a targeted web server to like maybe an outbound single to another DNS or DNS call. Now, monitoring those random connections can actually help you uncover potential threats and some of the sleepers on your network. Now, once you detect those things, you can trap and trace them. Now, you give yourself some more time to put more defenses up against them and understand what's happening next. And as you wait, make sure you really contain the blast radius, and that's minimizing the risk. And we've talked a lot about this when we talk about zero trust, the whole concept of microsegmentation. Shut down access to crucial data and services and really contain the impact. Now, there's no silver bullet here. There's no magic recipe. These are just some of the ways that you can make things better and prepare yourself. However, a number of these techniques, for me, I think, are just working and training on some of the playbook items that make things better. I want to bring my co-host back in. Curtis, a lot of these things come down to staying cool and containing the threat while the impact of the activity is really investigated. Is that a good pattern to follow? Really just at least have a set of things in a playbook and just start executing on them when you start to see activity?
Well, let's admit that panic is rarely a winning strategy. So to the extent that you have some sort of playbook set up to handle even less common or unexpected specifics, the better off you're going to be. When it comes to watching these, a couple of things are critical. Number one, it is not unheard of, but it's less common for 0 days to be found in current generation software. By keeping your software updated and patched, you dramatically reduce the extent to which you're vulnerable to these things. The other thing is, and Lou alluded to this, the idea of the outbound traffic monitors cannot be overemphasized. Now, a lot of people will look primarily for traffic volumes. If you see someone shoving lots of traffic out, that's a red flag, and it is. But we have to admit that there are lots and lots of these attacks that go, as they call it in the industry, low and slow. They try to stay under the radar of the automated and AI-based detection systems. The thing is, you have to be looking at where your traffic is going, and when traffic starts going consistently to an unknown location, that's a red flag. We talk about dwell time. That's how the time that elapses between when an attack is successful, when it gains access, and when it's discovered. Industry average right now is still measured in weeks or months rather than hours. That needs to come down. But you also have to recognize that once a payload is clicked on, once they have access to the system, in general, these malware packages have gained persistence on a system within 1 to 1.5 seconds. So if your response involves alerting a professional to do something, you're too late already. You've got to use the combination of automation, machine intelligence, and a solid human-based playbook to do remediation.
Now, Curtis, you bring up a good point, because the last one there kind of sparks a question. And Chee, I want to bring you in too, because this is a good question for you. I think, a lot of organizations, they don't have these cybersecurity professionals that they need to really understand some of these protections and defenses. Mm-hmm. What's some of the things they can do? Curtis kind of talked about a couple of them. Are they a replacement for those professionals?
Actually, I think one small baby step is to not, that old saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. My big suggestion is education. If you treat your problems as company secrets and you're not willing to talk to someone about it, then you're going to keep having the same problems over and over and over again. I'm going to say, join InfoGuard or an organization like that. Share your woes with other people in the industry. Find the guy with the screwdriver, find the girl with the saw, learn the other tools. Because if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I'm going to keep saying that, but you need to learn what the other tools look like. Things like, learning Metasploit. That was one of the really cool seminars that the InfoGuard people did not too long before I left Honolulu. Learning how to use something like Metasploit so you can do some testing of your own infrastructure means there's less attack surface. Another big one that I used to do as a class was make use of VLANs, segment off your traffic so that if a 0-day makes use of things like directed broadcast or searching the collision domain for machines they can infect. If the collision domain or the VLAN or whatever, however you want to talk about it, is smaller and you've segmented off your traffic. So say, for instance, your warehouse is segmented away from accounting. and you have an IDS IPS or at least a firewall in between those segments, so it has a chance to look at the traffic trying to traverse the VLANs. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be less of a surface to attack. So it's something you might want to do. So down the bottom line, learn how to use the other tools. There's a lot of open source tools. There's a lot of inexpensive or free tools. I think the biggest thing is reduce your attack surface. Make sure you're up to date. Make sure you're patched. Use some of the tools out there to automate the patching process, because you may not have enough warm bodies to keep up otherwise. So learn to use the other tools. I think that's the bottom line.
I like that. Yeah, I guess, Curtis, I wanted to ask you, I mean, obviously you talk about tools, we talk about education, but the fact is the problem of having the right security professionals is a bigger problem than we think, right?
Oh, it's huge. Depending on exactly who you ask, we are somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000 cybersecurity professionals short of what we need. And the simple fact is we could run a huge national college program and we're not going to get that many. So what are you left to do? Some companies have decided that the answer is using MSSPs, or managed security service providers, to pick up the slack and take care of it for them. There are many good MSSPs, but there are also some limits on exactly how far they can go into your enterprise. For the rest, offering training to your cybersecurity professionals to keep them current and happy, and offering that training to bring IT generalists to a higher level of cybersecurity professionalism is a great thing. The human side can't be ignored, even when the service providers and the machine learning are doing the best job possible.
Indeed. Thank you, guys. Well, I think that one puts that to bed. I do want to get to my guests, so we should probably move forward here. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics big, small, and strange. Compiler comes from the makers of Command Line Heroes, another of our sponsors, and is hosted by Angela Andrews and Brent Simino. The technology can be big, bold, bizarre, and complicated. Compiler unravels industry topics, trends, and the things you've always wanted to know about tech through interviews with the people who know it best. Now, on their show, you will hear a chorus of perspectives from the diverse communities behind the code. Compiler brings together a curious team of Red Hatters to tackle big questions in tech, like what is technical debt, or what are tech hiring managers actually looking for? And do you have to know how to code to get started in open source? Now, episode 2 covers what can video games teach us about edge computing. Now, the internet is a patchwork of international agreements and varying infrastructures, but there's something coming to change the ways we connect. In this episode of Compiler, hosts explore the edge computing and what it can mean for people who enjoy video games, and what can this form of entertainment can teach us about the technology itself. Now, episode 9, how are tech hubs changing? Traditionally, if someone wanted a career in tech, they had to make a move to the tech hub or a city packed with startups and talent, but things are starting to change. The hosts of Compiler speak to a few of the change makers who are thinking outside of the physical and social dimensions we've come to associate with innovation. The edge computing episode is really, really good. They did an amazing job of actually distilling down what edge computing is and just how practical applications make it seem more accessible to everyone. So definitely check that one out. Learn more about Compiler at red.ht/TWIT. New episodes are out now, and go and download them anytime, and be sure to check back for new shows. Now, listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. We'll also include a link on this episode's show page as well. Many thanks to Compiler for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show. We're going to get to drop some knowledge on the TWiET riot. And today we have Josh Kuo. He's a DNS nerd from InfoBlox. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you guys there. I was so wrapped up in this new IETF draft that was released today. Just reading up on DNS. Hi.
Things are always changing on DNS, right? Well, I'd tell you one thing. I think you have the best title so far on the show. But before we get into what that title means and more about DNS, our part of our audience really loves to hear people's origin stories. Can you maybe take us through a journey through tech and what brought you to InfoBlox?
Sure. Yeah. So, unlike most of you, I wasn't bitten by a radioactive spider to get into this industry. I went to the University of Hawaii for computer science. That's where I met Brian. I worked in his lab. I'm one of his many what we call geopeds because we were all like little, spawning from his lab. In fact, I met my wife while working. We were both working at Brian's lab.
Fantastic.
So literally a job that changed my life. And from there, I went to school thinking I'm going to be a programmer, a software programmer. But just kind of took a lot of turns, I got into network engineering, got into InfoSec, got into systems, and eventually all that kind of took me to where InfoBlox is. I was kind of attracted to InfoBlox because DNS is one of those technologies that doesn't squarely fall into any of those. You kind of need to know something about networks. You need to know a little bit about systems. It's traditionally a sysadmin job. So, and as we'll see when we get into it, it's now a crucial part of security. So that's where I'm at now at InfoBlox. I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to be on the training team because something I learned from Brian. I also love to share my knowledge. So that's, yep.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was great to hear these stories. I think we want to hear maybe offline some more stories about Brian later. But I do want to get into some of the DNS stuff that we've been hoping that you can take us through. Now, we've been through our show a lot. We've talked a lot about some of the DNS exploits that are out there. Of course, it's a foundation to all networks and the internet. But I want to start from the beginning, maybe take us through just why DNS is such is one of those things that's exploitable, and some of the things you're seeing organizations doing and people doing to really protect themselves from it.
Okay, sure. And it's really, you're right, it's very foundational, but it's usually often overlooked. And I wonder, it was like a perfect setup from Curt earlier about looking at your outbound, right? Everybody, that's a whole separate subject. We're going to get into defending your DNS servers, but I want to focus on a part that rarely gets enough attention. That's your outbound DNS queries. And bad guys are taking full advantage of that. We have all kinds of security apparatus looking at traffic leaving your network. But these devices traditionally don't look into DNS packets. In fact, I don't know, we can skip around the graphics I have provided. If we look at graphics number 4 that I sent out earlier, that's a nice little illustration to show you how this happens. And we call that DNS tunneling. Right. So so it's a very high level. A client has been infected, maybe went to the coffee shop, came back with the malware, and it's sending out a DNS query to say, I want to look up command.drevil.com. Since it's not inspected, it gets all the way back into the environment, and drevil.com can send back whatever they want, disguised as a DNS response. And by the same token, that can be sending important information out, like credit card numbers. So I'll take a pause because I'm sure Brian or Curt might have something to add here.
Yeah, I'd love to bring the guys back in because I know that Brian, you have a lot of history with Josh, as well as a lot of history with security. It's you too as well, Curt. Anything to add to what Josh was talking about?
Well, I just wanted to bring up something. Josh and I have been working on a project together. I'm still under non-disclosure for it. But one of the things that was highlighted was DNS. You know how you see your web addresses, there's a question mark and there's a ton of stuff behind it. Well, you can do something similar with DNS. And because DNS is almost never looked at, all kinds of data can be exfiltrated. And this was one of the things, this was a horror story when I first learned about it, enough that I wrote a classified paper on it, because one thing I was telling some of the folks in the DoD was, hey, you may be blocking outbound traffic, but you're not blocking DNS requests. And that is one potential way of exfiltrating data out of what are potentially secure networks. It kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies, and I can't wait till I can talk more about this project that Josh and I are working on together, because I think it's going to be a really, really good way of learning about the tools available to you and the tools on what DNS can do to you if you're not watching.
Indeed. I'm looking forward to that as well. I'm curious to hear more about it. I did want to throw it back to Josh really quick, because I know that we talked about a lot of the exploits that are out there, and of course a lot of the user devices that go in and out of the network are vulnerable, but we hear a lot about some of the network appliances being exploited, where they just install something very small that allows them to exploit some of the DNS, so that the users then who are on the network, doesn't matter if their machines are exploited or not, go to more nefarious websites and download malware, or their browsers are then exploited and have remote code execution, that kind of thing. Is this something that can be stopped because the network appliance itself is kind of hosting this and doing this, or do you see organizations doing or not being able to manage against that because of the fact that they're not securing DNS?
That's a really good point. So I don't think we can ever completely stop all these exploits, because every time we come up with a new method, the bad guys just come up with another new one to bypass it. But we shouldn't be pessimistic about it. We still need to try to plug all the holes that we can. And right now, in my opinion, based on what I have seen, DNS is usually left wide open. We are heavily filtering, looking into deep packet inspection for mostly HTTP packets, sometimes even though decrypted before sending it, just to look at what's inside. But DNS, even the plain DNS, usually is not looked at all. And one of the confusion a lot of people have is there's a technology called DNSSEC, and then there's a whole new field of new ones, emerging ones called Encrypted Dns. If you guys could load the first graphic, please. I have an illustration showing where they go on the network. The misconception usually is that DNSSEC will give you just everything. I mean, it's called SEC, but it's really a protocol today mainly among DNS servers that provides authentication. So you can be sure I'm really talking to ns1.google.com. But once that DNS server gets the answer, it turns around and does plain text to the client over UDP, right? So that's what we call the last mile. And if I'm a bad guy, well, that's the place where I can do a lot of damage. So a new field emerged in the last couple of years, about 3 years. Encrypted DNS came up. And so there's DOT, there's DOH, and this May we had DOQ. So your listeners can go Google these names. These are new standards. Basically, that's what they do. They focus on, I'm going to encrypt the portion from your web browser to the ISP's DNS server. And that sounds great. A lot of people are like, oh, that's awesome. That will give me more security. Here's the problem, though. That doesn't look into what you are sending. So there's actually malware and ransomware that's taking advantage of this. They're sending out these secret communications, these command and control messages over DNS and then use encrypted DNS on top of that, counting on, well, you're not going to be able to see this. So this is a huge issue for a lot of enterprise that if your users are using encrypted DNS, then you lose that whole visibility. Even if you wanted to restrict what happens, what gets sent over DNS, adding encryption stops that.
Right. Well, I want to throw this over to Curt, because Curtis, you deal with a lot of organizations, do a lot of research here. Obviously DNS is one of those most vulnerable parts of an organization's network and the internet, right?
It is. And Josh, I want to ask questions about the practical impact of some of this, because, the fact is that many organizations would like to specify the DNS server that their employees use. And if you're all sitting there, jacked into Cat 6, it's not a problem. But at a time when so many of us are working from coffee shops, we are working from home, we're doing all of this other stuff. One of the huge problems that everyone runs into is what's called the captive portal. And for our listeners, this is where you go to a coffee shop, you pop up your browser, and the first thing that happens is that you get a splash screen saying you're on Joe's Coffee Shop internet, click accept for our terms of service, and maybe sign up for our newsletter. Specifying a DNS server wrecks captive portals. Where are we as an industry on figuring out that process? I know I've talked to some people who say, oh, we're just on the verge of solving that problem, or using our tool will get you around the captive portal problem. But realistically, is this still a stopper for a lot of good practices?
I think so, yes. I think captive portal continues to be one of the many issues that needs to be addressed. And I'm trying to think how DNS might fit into that. But actually, the one I want to branch off from your point was, that's the assumption. At the very beginning, you said, well, if I am at the corporate office, plug in a cable, I have control over my DNS setting. That's a very reasonable assumption from pretty much everyone. But that is not the case with encrypted DNS. So DOH, DNS over HTTPS, has been widely deployed silently. So I'm willing to bet all of us right now who are using a modern browser, our DNS traffic is going through port 443 encrypted to either Cloudflare or Google. If you use Firefox, a recent version, you can click to the settings to see a lot of them defaulted to, I'm going to quietly shift your DNS traffic to whoever I want, even though at the system setting, you might have said, please use the corporate DNS server. But when you go to a web page, Firefox is sending that data to whoever they want. Usually, I think Cloudflare. Same thing for Chrome, sends to 8.8.8.8. So that's a huge one. It breaks functionality, because if you have an internal name, say, internal.twit.tv, that can only be resolved in the building, well, when you visit that site, that intranet site using Firefox will go to their DNS server and say, I don't know where this is. And that's the least of your concern, because if that gets infected with malware and starts sending out credit card numbers over DNS, you also can't catch it.
That seems like a significant problem. I could be wrong, but it sounds significant to me. The other thing, I know that DNS is frequently one of the protocols that's used in DDoS attacks. You can use amplification techniques, several. Will the kind of encrypted connections and the DNS security that you're talking about mean that it's more difficult or impossible for criminals to use DNS as an attack vector in DDoS attacks?
Potentially, because some of the characteristics of DNS, of traditional, what we call DO53, the traditional DNS over port 53, is mostly UDP based. And UDP is fairly simple to spoof. So a bad guy can pretend, oh, my source IP is 10.10.10.10, go to a DNS server, ask a lot of things, and then the return gets reflected to the victim, 10.10.10.10. Now, this reflection is much, much harder to do using TCP. So all of the new encrypted DNS standards use either TCP or TCP-like technology, like QUIC. That's the latest round of technologies that we have at, I guess, layer 3.5, because it sits somewhere between layer 3 and layer 4. So yes, I believe as we move towards less UDP-based and more TCP-based technologies, some of these, not all, depends on how you carry out the nature of the DOS attack. But these easy things to do in DNS, these are some of the more prevalent ones we see today. Is the reflection, counting on spoofing source address. These will hopefully fade away. Hopefully.
Well, we've got more to talk about DNS, lots more to talk about here. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is userway.org. Now, every website without exception needs to be accessible. Userway's incredible AI-powered solution tirelessly enforces the hundreds of WCAG guidelines out there. Now, in a matter of seconds, Userway AI can achieve more than an entire team of developers can do in months. Now, at first, it may seem overwhelming to make your website accessible, but Userway's solutions make it simple, easy, and cost effective. You can even use their free scanning tool to see if your website is ADA compliant. Now, if you have an enterprise level website with thousands of pages, they also offer a managed solution where their team can handle everything for you in a managed way. Now, Userway's AI and machine learning solutions power accessibility for over 1 million websites trusted by Coca-Cola, Disney, eBay, FedEx, and many other leading brands out there. Now, Userway is making its best-in-class enterprise-level accessibility tools available to small and medium businesses. Now, you can get started today for as little as $49 a month on Userway's monthly plan. Your company can be ADA compliant, reach more customers, and build loyalty. And remember, you get 30% off. There are 1 billion people in the world with disabilities. That's roughly 13% of the population that you don't want to lose as potential customers because you're not compliant. Think about it. By not being compliant, fines and revenue loss will cost you so much more. Userway is the leading accessibility solution in the market today with a market share of 61%, the biggest in the world. For years, Userway has been on the cutting edge, creating innovative accessibility technologies that push the envelope of what's possible with AI, machine learning, and computer vision. Userway's AI automatically fixes solutions violations at the code level. And here are some of the things they can actually do. They auto-generate image alts. It writes image descriptions for you. It remediates complex nav menus and ensures that all pop-ups are actually accessible. It fixes vague link violations and also broken links. It ensures your websites are really using accessible colors while remaining true to your brand. And Userway gives you a detailed report of all the violations that were fixed on your website. Now, Userway is platform agnostic, and it really integrates seamlessly with WordPress, Shopify, Wix, Sitecore, SharePoint, and more. Let Userway help your business meet its compliance goals and improve the experience for your users. The voice of Siri, Susan Bennett, has a message about Userway.
Hi, I'm Susan Bennett, the original voice of Siri. You won't hear me say something like this too often. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're looking for. But every day, that's what the internet is like for millions of people with disabilities. Userway fixes all of that with just one line of code.
Userway can make any website fully accessible and ADA compliant. With Userway, everyone who visits your site can browse seamlessly and customize it to fit their needs. It's also a perfect way to showcase your brand's commitment to million people with disabilities. Go to userway.org/TWIT and get 30% off Userway's AI-powered accessibility solution. Book a short call and get their accessibility guide. Userway, making the internet accessible for everyone. Visit userway.org/TWIT today. And we thank Userway for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Josh Kuo. He's really the DNS expert, DNS nerd from InfoBlox. Josh, thanks so much for being on the show. I do want to bring Cheebert back in because he has some good questions. Cheebert?
Actually, I want to let Josh kind of run with a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and I know it's near and dear to his heart. And that's, DNS over HTTPS or DNS over TLS. They both have, shall we say, some problems. But you've been reading up on a new IETF standard that might actually fix that. So why don't we start off with who's supporting these? What's wrong with DOH and what's wrong with DOT?
I'm going to be careful and not say there's something wrong with either one. Both are pretty good protocols, just the preferences. So DOT basically takes DNS messages, encrypt them, put it over TCP port 853. DOH, the HTTPS variant, basically says we're going to take all the DNS messages, convert them to, essentially web pages, HTTP messages, and then encrypt them, send them over port 443. So the design goal from the beginning has always been to make it look identical to just any web traffic. So the downside of the upside of doing DOH is it's very, very easy. You update Firefox, boom, you're on DOH. Right, that's probably what we're all using today. The downside is there's no device, to my knowledge today, that can inspect deep into that traffic and go, this is a web page getting, loading the front page of Facebook, or is this a DNS request that contains malicious traffic? Now, the new one that's just ratified in May, called DOQ, DNS over QUIC, may be the winner. It's too early to tell right now because it's a baby. It's an infant, right? Only a couple of months old. But what it aims to do is still encrypt DNS, still use QUIC, which means HTTPS, so you can do two-way authentication and do all the cool security stuff. But we're going to use UDP port 853. The benefit of that is, as an enterprise, I can now quickly, easily stop or inspect this traffic. Instead of mixing your normal web traffic with your encrypted DNS DOH on the same port, 443, now we peel them apart. 443 is for your web browser, web browsing traffic, and 853 UDP would be your encrypted DNS over QUIC. So I think, personally, I really, really like that. That's a great design. And I hope it takes off, because I think that's going to sort of give the organizations and enterprises the best of both worlds. You can have some control and you can have some privacy.
Okay, so you've brought some teasers from the project that you and I have been working with. And so you've got 6 slides that kind of take us through the issues with encrypted DNS.
Sure.
How about we go through those and learn a little bit about the encrypted DNS for the client side?
Okay, so maybe we'll just I'll show the last 2, 5 and 6, that would illustrate why encrypted DNS, sure, I think, in my view, is a double-edged sword. So in this diagram, we're showing this is a DNS exfiltration. The client has been infected somehow, right? Today, we don't know. You maybe because you're working at home and your son grabbed your laptop and downloaded something, and it has stolen some password. The infected client can encode this password to whatever stuff it wants and send it out as a DNS query to the attacker. And that's it. It goes out and you're done. There's no coming back. The attacker has your stolen data. And I know A lot of people listening to this, well, that sounds really hard to do. Are people really doing it? And my next graphic shows yes. Number 6, Alina POS. This is a malware that's focused on attacking credit card processing point of sale systems. And this has been around since 2013. And the earlier variants of this malware was using web, HTTP, to send out the stolen credit card info. That was getting stopped. So these clever malware authors said, we're going to switch to DNS because no one's stopping looking at DNS. So that's what they did. And then so they can steal your credit card number, make a query to say, what is, Josh Cool 1111111, my credit card number, .attacker.com. And that's it. It goes out. We don't need to worry. There's no coming back. Because as soon as that DNS query hits the attacker's DNS server, they're going to be like, thank you. I've got Josh's credit card number. I don't need to send a response.
Wow. Scary stuff. So what kinds of things can we do now? As a IT administrator and then also as a home user, are there things that we can do to make it harder for them to steal our stuff?
So, yes and no. So the encrypted DNS piece is a little trickier. That's not a strictly good or bad, but there's a lot of DNS filtering capabilities out there. There's some commercial products, and there's open source ones like Pi-hole. So if you're, I think most of the listeners are very technical. You can get a Raspberry Pi, install Pi-hole, and it would download basically a list of bad domains. And when you query the DNS server, hey, take me to stealmycreditcard.com, it just says, nope, sorry, that name doesn't exist. So this is obviously the home version, and many vendors have commercial variants. And even better, more advanced vendors may have AI and ML powered machine learning engines that looks at the pattern going on, hey, that looks like a credit card. Stop. But that I'm not aware of any open source projects that can do that. I mean, if you want to roll your own, you could maybe send that to a log server, look for the pattern, and then tell the DNS server stop. So it's theoretically possible.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is I can't say anything, it's not yet. That's why Josh and I are kind of dancing around on certain things. Let's just say there's going to be something available someday soon that will hopefully help you learn the tools on how to secure or better secure DNS, maybe reduce the attack surface to make the bad guys work a lot harder, which I think that sounds like a great idea. But in the meantime, I think what we need to do is we need to go and get Josh to go and tell the viewers where they can go to get more information about this type of things, about DNS security, and maybe read a little bit of the work he's been doing for InfoBlox. So, Mr. Josh, where can they go?
Okay, so InfoBlox.com, that's my employer, and I don't remember the link off the top of my head. You can search for DNS Security for Dummies. That is a short book that I had published a few years ago that covers high level. Also from our website, you can look under, I think, services and look for education services. We have a lot of free resources because I think Chee also talked about education is, I agree, very, very important. So there's a lot of free educational resources that you can get and view and can learn about what's happening, things like DOQ or encrypted DNS, or things like that.
Thanks, Josh. Well, we really appreciate you being here. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, folks, you've done it today. Again, you've sat through another hour of the best selling enterprise and IT podcast in the universe. So definitely tune your podcatcher to TWiET. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, you have a lot of busy stuff coming up very soon. Where can people find you and all your work?
Well, if they want to keep up with me while I'm off doing the conference scene, they can follow me on Twitter at KG4GWA. Keep up with me on LinkedIn. Subscribe to me there because I am going to be publishing 2 or 3 pieces there next week. You can look for me over at Dark Reading. That's Dark Reading /Omdia. And I'm going to have, I've gotten a little behind, but I've got a bunch of new videos that will be going up on my YouTube channel very soon. So just look for me on the interwebs, and I'll be there. Going to be trying to talk a lot this coming week because there's going to be a ton to talk about. And look forward to being back on TWiET in a couple of weeks to share some of the things that I discovered out in the desert.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Curtis. Great to have you here. Well, we also want to thank our very own Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you?
First, I got to say, I am so proud of my ex-students. My goodness. Thanks, Josh. Does my heart good. But you're also welcome to hear me brag about my students on Twitter. I'm ADVNETLAB. That's Advanced Net Lab. That's actually the name of the lab that Josh and I first met, the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory at the University of Hawaii. The whole idea was to try and get the students exposed to some of the leading edge and bleeding edge technology to balance out the ivory tower experience, give them some practical experience. Josh is actually one of many students that have gone with me to help build the world's largest mobile network. Well, world's largest temporary network is what it ended up as, and that's the InterruptNet. It's lots of fun. It was a great learning experience for all of us. You're also welcome that if you want to throw us show ideas and so forth, or ask questions, feel free. I am Cheebert, spelled CHEEBERT at twit.tv, or you can also send email to TWiET at twit.tv, and that'll hit all the hosts. Now, I will say, because it came up in the pre-show, Josh was one of the group. He wasn't the person, but he was one of the group that actually named me Cheebert. We had a Dilbert naming theme for all the servers in the lab. And Mike Kanata, who now I believe still works for Spirent, decided I needed to be Cheebert. So there you are. Another piece of trivia for you to play.
Thanks, Cheebert. Well, folks, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show to get your enterprise goodness. I want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise and IT news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiET. There you'll find all of our amazing back episodes, the show notes, co-host information, guest information, of course, the links of the stories that we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos there, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version, video version of your choice, and listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast applications, because we're on all of them. So definitely subscribe and support the show. But you can also support us by joining Club TWiT as well. That's right. Club TWiT is a members-only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't get anywhere else, and it's only $7 a month. That's right. There are lots of great things about Club TWiT, and one of them is the exclusive access to a members-only Discord channel or Discord server. Lots of channels on there. You can chat with hosts, producers, separate discussion channels. Plus, of course, they also have some amazing special events on there somewhere, some that are really super interesting. So definitely check that out. Lots of discussions, lots of channels. Definitely join Club TWiT. Be part of the movement. Go to twit.tv/Club TWiT. And Club TWiT now also offers corporate group plans as well. It's a great way to give your team access to our ad-free tech podcast. That plan starts at 5 members at a discounted rate of just $6 each per month. And you can add as many seats as you like. And it's really a great way for whether it's your IT department, your developers, your tech teams, your sales teams, to stay on top of and also access to all of our podcasts. And just like regular memberships, they can join the TWIT Discord server as well and also get that TWIT Plus bonus feed. So definitely join it, twit.tv/ClubTWIT. Now, after you subscribe, impress your family members, your coworkers, your friends with the gift of TWiET, because we talk a lot about some fun tech topics on this show, and I guarantee they will find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely share it with them and get them on and get them subscribed as well. And if you've already subscribed and you're available on Fridays, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, we do this show live. That's right, live right now. Live.twit.tv is the website. Has all of our streams on there. You can watch it live, watch how the pizza's made, the behind the scenes, all the banter that we do before, during, and after the show. So definitely check out the live stream. If you're going to watch the live stream, definitely check out our IRC, our infamous IRC channel as well. It's irc.twit.tv. Lots of amazing characters in there. We get some great show titles, some great topics for the show, questions, some great banter. So thank you guys for being there each and every week and really making our show great because of it. So thank you. And definitely join that IRC channel, irc.twit.tv. Now, definitely hit me up at twitter.com/LouMM. There I post all my enterprise tidbits. I get direct messages for show ideas. I love that. We've just been talking about some tech topics behind the scenes. You can also hit me up at linkedin.com as well. I have some great conversations with people like you about show topics, about technology, about software. I even talked to some people about Access because I am the engineering manager of Access. So definitely hit me up there and talk more about that. Of course, you want to find out what I do during my normal work week at Microsoft, please check out developers.microsoft.com/office. There we post all the latest and greatest ways for you to customize your Office experience and make it more productive for you and your organization. So definitely check it out. Lots of fun stuff on there, lots of fun projects and different technologies for you to do that. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we couldn't do the show without them. So thank you for all their support over the years. Of course, I want to thank all the engineers and staff at TWIT as well. And of course, thank you to Mr. Brian Chee one more time. He's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer as well. He does all the show bookings and the plannings for the show. We really couldn't do the show without him. So thank you, Cheebert, for all your support over the years. Now, of course, before we sign out, we have to thank our editor for today, Mr. Anthony. He's going to make us look good behind the scenes. He's going to cut out of all of our gibberish and all of our mistakes. So thank you, Anthony, for all of that. And of course, we also have to thank our TD for today. That's right, Mr. Ant Pruitt. He's the talented Mr. Ant Pruitt. He does a fabulous show, amazing show called Hands On Photography. Ant, what's going on this week in Hands On Photography?
Yes, sir. We talked about Instagram because you know how they just love photographers, but they actually have some updates going out for their live producers. So if you want to do Instagram Live. But yeah, I just wanted to get everybody's thoughts on that. I think it's going to be okay and something that we could all play with. And also, I'm going to give a shout out to Mr. John Ashley, who's editing the show today.
Thank you, Ann. Appreciate that. And of course, I appreciate all the support. Well, folks, I'm Louis from Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
If you are looking for a midweek update on the week's tech news, I got to tell you, you got to check out Tech News Weekly. See, it's all kind of built in there with the title. You get to learn about the news in tech that matters. Every Thursday, Jason Howell and I talk to the people making and breaking the tech news, get their insights and their interesting stories. It's a great show to check out, twit.tv/TNW.